Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is going to be episode number 55, and we've been on a little bit of a hiatus. I've recently moved, and I kind of took a break from doing everything while that was occurring. And now that I'm getting settled into my new place, we're going to pick up again. Lord willing, I'll start doing one of these a week again. Excuse me. But we left off with the second part of the America's Secret Beginnings trilogy by Chris Pinto. And so the first one, I forget what the first one was called. Is the first one just America's Secret Beginnings? Or, hmm, man, I can't remember the name of the first one. The one we just did is called Riddles and Stone, and I think I've mentioned before that's probably my favorite of the trilogy. Just showing the occult foundations of America, um, the Masonic, Gnostic, Luciferian agenda in the different monuments, the street layout of Washington D.C. Um, the Francis Bacon agenda. Francis Bacon was really the leader of that during his age. Benjamin Franklin kind of took over for him, and it's this Luciferian idea of building the New Atlantis. That was the first one. The first one's called New Atlantis. The occult agenda has always been to build a utopia, but it's a fascist utopia. It's a dictatorship, and these people reject the knowledge of the Bible. They reject the authority of the scriptures, and so they set about trying to build a humanistic a utopia, um, based on their Luciferian philosophies. They're in communication with principalities and powers through their various different forms of witchcraft and sorcery, and they gain this esoteric knowledge, this demonic knowledge that's pushing everything towards a new world order, or what the Bible calls the beast system, the end of the world beast system, in which the entire world, every tribe, tongue, and nation will lie under sway of the devil. And so, while these people think they're building a utopia, they're really working for the devil to build this Luciferian system, this authoritarian system that's coming. That I believe personally, we're getting very, very close to. Um, America has been taking drastic steps recently, and really for like the last century, towards erasing freedoms and moving into an authoritarian fascist type government. And America is really the leader of the world. Where America goes, the world follows. And it's my opinion that America is used by Satan as the muscle behind the New World Order system. That America is used to build the foundation of the New World Order, to set up this system. And we're there. It's. If you look at the world banking system as part of this Luciferian system, because the book of Revelation says that this beast system will require a mark, and without that mark, you won't be able to buy or sell. So it's an economic system, and the banking system of the world is definitely a Luciferian system based on usury, which the Bible condemns. And the people who run the banks are these high level Luciferians that people commonly call the Illuminati. And they control the entire system, everything. They run it all. They own all the corporations, all the media. It's all owned by a very, very, very small group. Some people narrow it down to 13 families, 13 bloodlines. And we're going to look into that later down the line. But this world system is being pushed forward. And so when you look at my point with the world banking system, you can see the control they already have. I think it's all but 5 countries belong to this New World Order banking system, that they belong to the World Bank system, in which they're indebted to these Illuminati families. And so the system already exists, it's already in play. Um, the outline of it, the shadow of it exists in the UN. We can kind of see what that body of government's going to look like. And like I say, I think America has been used to really drive this. So this Francis Bacon, Gnostic, Benjamin Franklin idea was to establish America as the new Atlantis, and then to use this new Atlantis to create this worldwide system. And so that's what's going on. And so in this third part here, we're going to be looking into that even deeper. I believe, I don't recall exactly what's all in this documentary, but it's called The Eye of the Phoenix. So we're gonna get into a lot of the I think the occultism, the well, I'm not really sure. Like I say, I can't remember what's in this third one, but we'll jump into it. I know it's good. I know all the Chris Pinto documentaries are good, and I really enjoyed these when I first watched them. Unfortunately, it's just been years since I've actually seen this third one. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump into it, and we'll discuss as we go. All right, so here we go.
There's still a lot of mysteries around a lot of things that happened in this country.
In the night, up came a person who was wearing a cloak, and he had in his hands the Great Seal of the United States. Jefferson, of course, looked at it and said, "This is it."
It's a very dangerous thing to reveal the truth, but we have to.
Let's go back to really important individuals here. His name is Nicholas Roerich.
The truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top. Nicholas Roerich is the person who is responsible for that ending up on the dollar bill.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and Henry Wallace was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, Henry Wallace was deeply involved in the occult.
Roerich to Wallace to FDR to the dollar bill.
I was initiated into this very ancient order.
Here we are at the Nicholas Roerich Museum.
Do you really think it has anything to do with the Illuminati?
The owl is the totem symbol of the Illuminati.
Yes, because Roerich was the Illuminati.
They all seem to have been Masons.
His son was murdered.
Those who normally get out, they're killed. Pentagrams are used during occult ceremonies when you're summoning up demons.
Because we're dealing with Lucifer.
And the all-seeing eye of God is one of the emblems that the Freemasons use.
He said, "Are you trying to say that masonry is evil?" I said, "It comes right out of the same pit of hell." Didn't win a lot of friends that day.
Just real quick, they're going to get into all this, and we're going to actually go in depth on the symbols on the dollar bill. That voice that was coming over the recording is Doc Marquis, and we're going to watch a lot of his videos. He's got a lot of great information. I believe one of those documentaries is all about the dollar bill and the symbols that are on the dollar bill. But if you've ever wondered, like, what does the Pyramid of Gaza, what do Egyptian pyramids have to do with America? Why is that on the back of the dollar bill? Well, it's a very telling symbol. It's got the 13 levels, which represent the 13 families of the Illuminati, and then it's got the all-seeing eye of Horus, and Horus is just another name for Lucifer, for Satan. It's a glorified eye, the illumined eye, and it's truncated. It's not connected to the pyramid. So it's not that, it represents the beast system, that New World Order system. And when the symbol was adopted back in the late 1700s, it wasn't put on the dollar bill until the 1900s, but it was the seal of America as far back as Jefferson and Franklin and all them. When that was done in the 1700s, the New World Order system wasn't yet. That's why it was floating above. It wasn't completed yet. But I believe that over the past 250, 300 years, whatever it is, we've made significant advancements. Like I say, if you look at the world banking system as an example, almost the entire world lies under the sway of the New World Order system now. And so that the phrase annuit coptis, the translation of that isn't exactly known, but it's loosely translated, he looks on with favor, or another translation says now announcing. But then Novus Ordo Seclorum on the bottom of the dollar bill is New Order of the Ages, or New World Order. Seclorum, secular world. Novus, New Ordo, Order. So it's announcing, now announcing the New World Order. And then it's the Illuminati pyramid with the all-seeing eye of Lucifer above it. And so I mean, it's right there in plain sight for everybody to see. And then on the other side, you have the phoenix, which they say is an eagle, but the way it's coming up and looking to the side, it's the phoenix that's disguised as an eagle. A phoenix rises out of the ashes. And then it's got the 13 olive branches, the 13 stars that are, if you ever notice that too, it's got the Star of David, the 6-pointed star at the top. Again, you would have to think, like, what does that have to do with America? Why is that on there? But it's a Luciferian symbol. And then on the shield on the $1 bill, I believe that's, if you're looking at a dollar bill, you're looking at the front side, the number 1 in the upper right corner has a shield around it, the Rothschild shield. And on the upper left corner of that shield, there's a tiny little owl that represents the Illuminati, because an owl is supposed to be a wise creature that can see in the dark. It has knowledge that others can't see. So again, that knowledge is power, the hidden gnosis. It's an Illuminati symbol, that owl. It's also the same symbol that the IRS uses. It's got the owl holding the scales of justice. So we're going to get into all that as we go along, but because they were talking about it, I just wanted to address it real quick. They're probably going to talk a lot about it here in this DVD. So, and then that Doc Marquis one we look at is going to go in depth on it. It's called Secrets of the Dollar Bill, so of course they're going to go in depth about it.
Our history of the dollar bill is a strange telling, one that involves an American president, a former vice president, a mysterious Russian mystic, and a determined Jewish researcher on the trail of an ancient artifact that is said to have been in the possession of the most powerful rulers in history, and somehow directly influenced the design of the dollar bill. As incredible as it seems, it's believed this mysterious object could mark the beginning of Armageddon.
There's going to be a bloodbath there.
With them is an expert in the signs and symbols of the occult world.
This is not the eagle.
Who claims that the details of the dollar bill are no accident, but represent the diabolical working of secret societies.
This is the eye of the phoenix, looking on in favor of the secrets of the dollar bill.
Most debates about the design of the dollar bill usually involve the founding fathers of America, but it's important to remember.
Did you notice, if you look at that Washington monument, it's got Washington going like this? I don't know if you can see this hand. He's pointing down with this hand, pointing up with this. It's the as above, so below. You know, we looked at that in that last video, how they build their monuments and city layouts according to the stars, because they believe there's power. If they reflect the heavens in the city layouts, they get demonic power and whatnot. But the Washington monument where he's doing that, if you compare that with the Baphomet symbol, if you just like Google Baphomet, and you'll find the transsexual devil, where he's, you know, got the breasts of a woman and the serpents on his stomach and the horned goat. He's in the exact same pose as Washington. The Washington monument and the Baphomet symbol are the exact same thing. They just replaced the goat's head with Washington's head. It's pretty crazy.
That they only designed a Great Seal. There are many details to the dollar bill that go far beyond the seal itself. The Great Seal was developed through 3 committees involving a total of 14 men. But in the end, The work was submitted in June of 1782 by essentially one man, Charles Thomson. What is little known is that while Thomson presented a preliminary sketch, his final design was submitted to Congress only in the form of a written description. Looking at the rough drawings Thomson put together with artist William Barton, it becomes clear that many of the specific details of the seal, as we know it today, were added later on. For example, above the head of the American eagle are 13 stars that form a six-pointed hexagram. While Thomson's description called for the 13 stars, their hexagram formation was not part of his original description and is not present in the earliest realizations of the design. The hexagram seems to have been added in the 20th century. The nature of the Great Seal is so mysterious that some believe that it came from a supernatural force. An account recorded by Dr. Robert Hieronymus in his book, Founding Fathers, Secret Societies, says that the Great Seal was given to Thomas Jefferson by a mysterious cloaked figure.
I love that story. The Founding Fathers were trying to get the Great Seal of the United States designed. They needed to have a design for the Great Seal to represent our nation. And Jefferson went outside in the night, and up came a person, an individual who was wearing a cloak whom he couldn't totally see, and he had in his hands the Great Seal of the United States. And he basically said, or this being said, you know, you're struggling over the symbol for our nation? Here it is.
The account reads that Jefferson told a strange story. A man approached him wearing a black cloak that practically covered him, face and all, and told him that he, the strange visitor, knew they were trying to devise a seal, and that he had a design which was appropriate and meaningful.
Jefferson, of course, looked at it, according to this story, and said, this is it. This is it. He knew it was it, and it was right. So he supposedly came running back into whatever, whether it was a tent or whatever it was, and he showed it to other individuals, and he told them about, they met this person outside. Of course, they went outside to go to find the guy, and he's gone. So supposedly we'll never find out who designed the Great Seal of the United States.
While Dr. Hieronymus admits that he is skeptical about such stories, there are others who claim to believe them to this day. Perhaps it has something to do with John Adams, who was on the first seal committee with Thomas Jefferson. According to the written account, John Adams was there when this bizarre event took place. Oddly enough, the Adams Memorial in Washington, D.C. is adorned with this mysterious cloaked figure. Perhaps it's just a coincidence. The first historical account of the Great Seal's design was written by a 19th century American Army officer named Charles A.L. Totten. In his book on the secret symbols of the dollar bill, Masonic author David Oveson writes that Totten equated the birth of the United States with the beginnings of what he called the New Atlantis, a title given to a work by Sir Francis Bacon, one of the mysterious financial backers of the Virginia colony. Oveson goes on to write that the Great Seal and the dollar bill represent the most extraordinary example in history of the public evolution of a magical design. Even as Sir Francis Bacon and his contemporary, Dr. John Dee, were said to be in contact with the spirit realm, there are those who believe that it is this dimension that has been guiding the course of America and the so-called evolution of the dollar bill. Debates have gone on for years about the secret symbolism of the Great Seal of the United States, whether or not these symbols represent secret societies, or if they are what the White House and the U.S. Congress currently tell us, symbols of divine providence, of stability, and the patriotism of America. What the Founding Fathers intended as they designed and ultimately approved of the Great Seal remains mostly a mystery.
There's still a lot of mysteries around a lot of things that happened in this country. It's not in our history books.
There can be no doubt that those things hidden in the shadows of the last 2 centuries are not easily brought to light.
I just want to, a lot of this stuff is so insane. It's like, man, but it's real. This is what's really going on. The people in power are really into this occult nonsense. And it ties into the scriptures. It's what the scriptures told us was going to happen. That, that the kings and rulers plot against God and against his Christ. In Psalm 2, the kings and rulers of the world plot against God. It specifically told us that. And Revelation foretells about this coming New World Order system. And we see it playing out before our very eyes. It's hard. I hope over the course of these videos, people are starting to grasp what's really going on here from a biblical standpoint, that the devil is the god of this world, little g. He's the ruler of this world. He's the prince of the power of the air. It belongs to him. Christ's kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, and Christ wins in the end. But for the time being, things belong to him, and he gives his kingdoms, he gives power to whom he wills. And so you have men that have rejected the God of the Bible, have rejected the authority of the scriptures, that are brought up in ancient occult mystery religions, the Babylonian mystery religions, that have various different denominations, whether it's Masonry or Rosicrucianism or Knights Templar or the Jesuits or whatever it is, Mormonism, or the various different divisions, the different denominations of Satanism, the different denominations, because most people aren't going to just outright agree to worship Satan. That's a scary thought to people. The moment, if you were to just walk up to a person uninitiated and say, hey, will you worship Satan and we'll give you power, immediately they're going to think about hell and they're going to think about the repercussions. So you can't just drop that on it. It's cunningly divided out secretly through gnosis, through Gnostic teachings, through knowledge is power, hidden knowledge, the original lie of the garden. Eat from the tree of knowledge, and ye shall be as gods. That's the foundation of this religious system that has now become much more complex and branched out into these various different fields. But people are brought up through this, and because you can't just drop the Satanism on a person, you have to test them to see if they're ready to accept higher and higher levels of Luciferianism. They're brought up through levels, which is most recognizable in the Masonry system or in the Illuminati system with the degrees. They're brought in and tested and seen, do they have faith in Yahweh? Do they have faith in the Bible? If so, they're not going to advance. But if they're willing to accept the Gnostic ideas, these Luciferian ideas, in incremental steps, they're brought further and further up the chain until they're so indoctrinated and so submerged in the satanic occultism that they're then willing to accept Lucifer as God. They're willing to accept Satan as God and to worship him. And when they reach those levels, they're given the keys to the kingdom. They're given power. They're put into powerful positions. That's why so many of our presidents have been 33rd degree Masons. That's why so many of the Supreme Justice and congressmen and CEOs are involved in all these Luciferian occultism. It's why the bankers, who are really the head of the pyramid, the ones that are running everything, like I say, these 13 bloodlines, these 13 families, control everything. Like when you think about riches, like Forbes puts out its richest people in the world, and it's like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or the Tesla guy, and it's like, oh yeah, they're worth, you know, $125 billion, and that's pennies, that's chump change compared to the real secret. Like if you think about the American debt, like I don't know how much we're in debt, like I forget what it is. It's like $50 trillion or something like that. Man, I wish I could remember this real quick. I did the math the other day. Just give me a second here. How much is the current American debt? I apologize about this, but this was a thought I had and I want to get it out here. So the current U.S. debt stands at, what is that, trillion? $28 trillion, which is $86,000 per citizen. So 28 trillion. Okay, and then you got to think, okay, who's this debt owed to? Why does our government have to borrow money to run our government? Who's it owed to? Who's this money? Who are we indebted to? And it's the Federal Reserve System, which is not a government institution. They gave it the name federal to trick everybody into thinking it's government, but it's a private bank. It's owned by stockholders, and it has these stocks. You can't even find out who owns the stocks. It's a secret. There's Class A and Class B stockholders, and the Class B stockholders, you can find that out, but the Class A stockholders is a secret. It's guarded. It's private. You can't figure it out. Well, what it is, it's these Illuminati families. They're the ones that own the banks. So if you take that 28 trillion, and there's 13 of these families, and say 50% of that goes towards the Class B stockholders, which is like Chase Manhattan, Wells Fargo, and all that, which is also owned by these guys. But then you probably have other people on there too. You know, they pay off the high-level politicians and stuff by giving them stock, by giving them a part of this corporation. Stick with me here, though. I have a point. So let's say it's half of that 28 trillion. Let's just let's just call it 13 trillion. Each one of these stockholders, each one of these families then gets $1 trillion of that profit, that debt that's owed to them. $1 trillion to 13 families. All right, and that's just one country. There, like I say, all the countries are indebted to these central bankers, all but 5. There, and those 5 we're trying to take over now. Those are the 5 that we classify as evil countries, and the propaganda media is constantly trying to get us to go to war with them. North Korea, Iran, Cuba, stuff like that. It used to be Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, now the New World Order has taken those places over. So if you think, like, if there's 180 countries that are each indebted to these banks, and if they're just 10% of what the American national debt is, you know, you got another 100 billion times 180. What is that? Another 18 trillion. So, or whatever, the math I'm just doing off the top of my head. I don't know if that's accurate, but my point is, you have 13 families that are worth trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, and yet Forbes says Steve Jobs with it, or Bill Gates with his, you know, 125 billion. It's nothing compared to these trillions. And not only do they own the banks, they own the corporations. They own everything. Everybody is indebted to them. They own it all through the banking system, through this debt usury fiat money system. They, like a web, have ensnared the entire world. They own everything. They control everything. And these are the high-level Luciferians, the ones that not only advanced in occultism, but were born into occult families and were taught this stuff from birth up, and are in communication through witchcraft and seances, which is why all these symbols and numerology and as above, so below is so important to them, because they believe it opens them up to communication with these ascended masters or fourth dimensional beings, whatever they call them. We, those that study the scriptures, know it's principalities and powers. It's demons they're talking to. So they're getting their information from them. They're getting their power and control from these principalities and powers. And so I forget what my original point was here, but you have these Luciferian occultists at the top of everything from Disney to McDonald's to Sony to Ford to the colleges to the insurance agencies to the pharmaceutical companies, all owned and controlled by this Luciferian system. At the peak of which is these 13 families. And then underneath that, you have other high-level occultists that answer to these guys. There's a committee of 300 called the Olympians that are directly below these 13 families. And then you have other, high-level secret organizations. But then the interesting thing is on the other side of that pyramid, you have the religious branch, which is headed by the Jesuits, by the Roman Catholic system. The whore of Babylon, as Revelation 17 calls, who rides the beast, who controls the system. And then we'll get into that all further down the line. But I wanted to share those thoughts, but before we jump further into this.
But when one comes into the modern era, into the age of photography, film, and the advanced practices of mass media, it becomes a bit easier to document world events and the intentions of those who have helped to shape them. In the late 19th century, Harvard professor Charles Eliot Norton referred to the Great Seal as a dull emblem of the Masonic fraternity. This idea was furthered by occult philosopher Manly P. Hall in the early part of the 20th century. Hall not only believed that the Great Seal was Masonic, but that it was created through the collective consciousness of the occult societies and represented the secret destiny that they had in mind for America.
I'd say that he saw the secret destiny of America as the beginning of a world democracy, and that this was a kind of an experiment in democracy that had been envisioned for thousands of years before. So he saw this much like Francis Bacon envisioned what he called the New Atlantis.
In 1926, Hall began publishing a newspaper called The All-Seeing Eye, dedicated to his occult views of philosophy. It was during Hall's era that the all-seeing eye of the Great Seal would be taken out of obscurity and placed on the back of the dollar bill by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1935. This might all be seen as just a coincidence, if not for the fact that FDR seemed to be familiar with Hall's teachings on the occult. Today, Hall's legacy is carried on at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, California, a society that Hall founded in 1934, just 1 year before the Great Seal found its way onto the back of the dollar bill. The current president of Hall Society is Dr. Obadiah Harris, shown here in what is called the Wisdom Library at PRS. According to their website, the library is made up of writings that deal with divination, tarot cards, Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, metaphysics, Buddhism, theosophy, and secret societies.
And wisdom literature is about relationships not only to each other, but to nature, to the universe. That's what this library is. This library is a library about the wisdom that is in nature and in...
the Bible calls that earthly, sensual wisdom, not godly wisdom.
You're in relationships and how it is that you can tap into that wisdom in any culture. It all overlaps. And Mr. Hall felt like that was really the future for the human race.
Like Hall, Dr. Harris believes in the destiny of America. Even more interesting is that Dr. Harris's own writing on the subject was unofficially acknowledged by an important figure in FDR's White House.
I wrote a little book one time. One of my first books I wrote was The Reawakening of the Americas. So we usually lose sight of the fact that the whole continent. And I got a little 1-cent postcard from Eleanor Roosevelt thanking me for that. I carried that around for years because I thought that was a great compliment.
But even more important was the familiarity that President Franklin Roosevelt had with the arcane literature in Manly Hall's so-called Wisdom Library, a collection of occult books that Hall had gathered from all over the world.
And Mr. Roosevelt himself, as you know, back in 1942, after the Pearl Harbor invasion, sent some of his people here to microfiche the works in this library because he looked upon it as a national treasure. He wanted to preserve it. And I was surprised that when I first heard that, just how much he seemed to know about such a treasure of wisdom that is contained here.
FDR's interest in the arcane and mystical was further reflected in the relationship he had with his Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Asgard Wallace.
And so it was then in 1935 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and Henry Wallace was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, Henry Wallace was deeply involved in the occult.
Wallace's interest in mysticism was well known in circles around Washington, D.C., but it was something that would eventually damage his career in American politics. H.L. Mencken dubbed Wallace the Swami, while it was also said of him that he was the only cabinet member who dabbled in the occult and who could cast a horoscope. In spite of all this, FDR ardently defended him. According to one account, when one of FDR's close advisors worried that many people considered Wallace a mystic, Roosevelt snapped, "He's not a mystic, he's a philosopher. He's got ideas, he thinks right, he'll help people think." But the question was, who was helping Wallace think? This question has been deemed critical because it was Henry Wallace who suggested to FDR that the Great Seal be placed on the back of the dollar bill. But why?
Well, it has a lot to do. Let's go back to really important individuals here. His name is Nicholas Roerich. And Nicholas Roerich was a very advanced spiritual soul with considerable vision. Nicholas Roerich was also a Rosicrucian. He was also a member of other secret societies.
Roerich was a Russian painter and mystic who was deeply involved in theosophy and the teachings of Madame H.P. Blavatsky. He is famous for his travels into Tibet and the Far East in search of the legendary kingdom of Shambhala. But what was his relationship to FDR's Secretary of Agriculture?
I believe that Nicholas Roerich was a spiritual teacher, not a supreme spiritual teacher, but was a teacher of Henry Asgard Wallace.
Roerich was considered not only a teacher, but a spiritual mentor and guru to Henry Wallace. It's believed that Wallace recommended the Great Seal to FDR because of the mystical influence Roerich held over him.
The dollar bill was approved with the all-seeing eye and the truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top of the because of Nicholas Roerich.
In the book, Tournament of Shadows, the authors document much of the activities and influence of Roerich during this period. They write that Roerich's influence was suspected in the adornment of the $1 bill, with a verso of the Great Seal showing a pyramid crowned by an all-seeing eye. The story of Wallace's role with FDR is told by the State Department in an official history called The Eagle and the Shield, a history of the Great Seal of the United States.
Henry Wallace, while sitting in the State Department, found a booklet on the Great Seal of the United States.
Wallace recollects that day in letters he wrote in 1951 and in 1955. He says, turning to page 53, I noted the colored reproduction of the reverse side of the seal. The Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum impressed me as meaning the New Deal of the ages.
In terms of the dollar, if there's a code about the New World Order, I think that they jumped a few decades from the New Deal, because the Novus Ordo Seclorum can be translated to the New Deal in English as easily and readily as to the New Order or the New World Order.
Initially, Wallace envisioned the Great Seal appearing on a coin. He took the idea to President Roosevelt.
So when Henry Wallace saw this booklet and saw this pyramid in the Iron Triangle, he was a Freemason. He was a member of a secret society. Immediately he said, whoa, what a symbol to have and not use. Let's use this. So it was he that went to the president, FDR, and FDR, being a Freemason, looked at those symbols and said, hey, yes, wow, this is, that's the New Order of the Ages. What's the New Deal? He actually thought to a degree that the Novus Ordo Seclorum was the New Deal.
Wallace wrote that Roosevelt, as he looked at the colored reproduction of the seal, was first struck with the all-seeing eye, a Masonic representation of the great architect of the universe. Next, he was impressed with the idea that the foundation for the new order of the ages had been laid in 1776, but that it would be completed only under the eye of the great architect. Roosevelt, like myself, was a 32nd degree Mason. He suggested that the seal be put on the dollar bill rather than a coin, and took the matter up with the Secretary of the Treasury.
If you'll remember, Albert Pike, I think, or maybe it was Manly Hall, one of the two said that at the 32nd degree and above is when Masonic initiates are told that they worship Lucifer. So if they're a 32nd degree Mason, they know who they worship. They're aware of their Luciferianism. It's not hidden to them. They know they're worshiping the devil. And 32nd degree, I would say even more so than a 33rd degree, because a lot of those 33rd degree Masons are honorary titles. Like I think Ronald Reagan was an honorary 33rd degree Mason. So like he didn't go through the initiate process. He didn't work his way up the levels. They just kind of give him that as like a gift, like people get their doctorate as in whatever as a symbol. It's not, they didn't really earn it. They didn't work their way. It's just a title given to them. So in some cases, a 33rd degree Mason it could just be somebody who's ignorant, and they just think it's an honor to get this initiation, this honorary title from this benevolent society of good men. But 32nd degree, that's not an honorary title. These people have worked their way up and have been initiated in the Gnostic system.
The Secretary of the Treasury at the time was Henry Morgenthau.
And he talked to Henry Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, and got him convinced that we should put this esoteric emblem from the back of the Great Seal of the United States onto the back of the dollar bill. This really symbolized the fact that now the esoteric influence dominated the American government.
And Morgenthau, the Secretary of Treasury, wrote extensively about this point, and he said there's some strange cabal, some mystical order behind the scenes, calling shots on the artwork that appears now on our dollar bills. He had to approve it. and he later had found out that this was all Henry Wallace's. It was all based on Henry Wallace's relationship to Nicholas Roerich. Nicholas Roerich is the person who is responsible for that ending up on the dollar bill.
Today, the story of Roerich's mystical influence is told by a variety of occult researchers.
You know, the dollar bill thing was about the New World Order. Actually, that came from Franklin D. Roosevelt and others around him, even Nicholas Roerich.
It's almost like baseball. Roerich to Wallace to FDR to the dollar bill.
While many people have never heard of Roerich, he was a well-known figure during the FDR era, in the years preceding World War II. His works of art were internationally recognized, so much so that an entire building in New York was erected to house his many paintings. Roerich was nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize and was the inspiration for the Roerich Peace Pact, which was signed by Henry Wallace in the presence of President Roosevelt at the White House. In 1986, Mikhail Gorbachev called Roerich one of the cultural pillars of Russia. The Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, the first man in outer space, when asked what the Earth looked like from orbit, answered, very much like the paintings of Nicholas Roerich.
He was a great oil painter, bar none. He's one of the greatest in terms of the Himalayan Altai scenes that he depicted. He did some wonderful work. He was a gifted artist.
But Roerich's story is one of success and disgrace, as he eventually fell out of favor with his greatest supporters, and at one point was suspected by the Soviets, the Japanese, and the United States of being a spy.
Information was coming out that Roerich may have been used as a spy when he went into these other nations in the Far East. And with that, that's what broke the link between Henry Wallace and Nicholas Roerich.
To learn more about this mysterious figure and his influence on the dollar bill, we travel to the Roerich Museum in New York, along with cipher expert and international codebreaker Buff Perry, who has long been associated with the museum and its curators.
Here we are at the Nicholas Roerich Museum at 319 West 107th Street, almost at the corner of Riverside Drive. His paintings hang on the walls of 3 floors of this building, and also many of the treasured archives, letters, and other writings and memorabilia of the Roerich family are housed here. I have a deep interest in the history of Nicholas Roerich and his family and their association with a long-lost artifact that I have had a lot to do with over the years.
We'll learn more about this artifact later on, as it ties together Nicholas Roerich with Henry Wallace, Manly P. Hall, and what some believe will be the future destiny of America. Like many who are involved in New Age and occult ideas, Nicholas Roerich dreamed of a united one world order.
Nicholas Roerich is seen as one of the key individuals, historical individuals, that had a lot to do with the development of the League of Nations and subsequently the United Nations, and is recognized as such in the United Nations building. I'm told, I haven't seen such commemoration, but I'm told it's there. And the history of the United Nations is often characterized in association with Nicholas Roerich's global peace efforts.
Roerich's dream was shared by his disciple, Henry Wallace, as demonstrated by the book Henry A. Wallace, His Search for a New World Order. This concept is visualized by the cracked bronze globe that sits outside the United Nations building, where a new world is literally breaking forth from the old. But somehow, Rorick's ideas on the subject would get him into trouble with Wallace when he traveled abroad on behalf of the United States government. In the book, Tournament of Shadows, we read that Rorick had been chosen by Henry Wallace to scour Central Asia for drought-resistant grasses to combat the Dust Bowl. This was the genesis of the Rorick expedition, financed and staffed by the Department of Agriculture. But during his 2-year expedition, Rorick seemed to be on a mystical journey, one that involved his quest for the legendary city of Shambhala, and literally searching for signs of the second coming of Christ.
Nicholas Rorick's idea was that the second coming of Christ may happen within years, and that's why he visited India, China, etc., and Russia, and digging up and trying to locate spiritual centers and spiritual information along those lines.
Authors Meyer and Bryzak write that
people seek wisdom in all these ridiculous, absurd sources when God has given us like all we need for life and holiness. He's given us God's wisdom from the Creator. We don't need any other source. We have it.
the search for Shambhala, which he identified with the second coming of Christ, and the Maitreya, or Buddha to come, obsessed Rorick. His paintings and writings thereafter conjured up his vision of a new age of peace, brotherhood, and enlightenment. But Rorick's concept of Christ, shown here in one of his paintings, was dramatically different from that of traditional Christianity. Both Rorick and Wallace were members of the Theosophical Society that was founded by Madame H.P. Blavatsky in the late 19th century. Blavatsky's view of religion can be summed up in her book, The Secret Doctrine. She makes use of the phrase Demon est Deus inversus, which means the devil is God inverted. Her view was based on the ancient Gnostic belief that in the Garden of Eden, the serpent who tempted the woman was really an angel of light, and that God, who had created Adam and Eve, was really the devil. The reason is because God had forbidden man from partaking of the tree of knowledge, or gnosis. This is the origin of the term Gnostic, or Gnosticism. Blavatsky further argued that Jesus was only one Messiah among many, like Buddha, Krishna, and Muhammad, and that the fifth Buddha, also called the Maitreya, is the last Messiah who will come. She says he will appear as Maitreya Buddha, the last of the avatars, or way-showers. This belief and expectation are universal throughout the East. This is the event that is said to have consumed Nicholas Rorick, and that he would have taught to his devoted disciple, Henry Wallace. The proof of their bizarre relationship was more fully revealed in a series of letters penned by Wallace to Nicholas Rorick.
Newsweek with Westbrook Pegler and others made a very big story out of what they called the Guru letters, the letters that Henry Wallace would send to Nicholas Rorick, which obviously he considered him a spiritual teacher from that standpoint.
Wallace had gone from being Secretary of Agriculture to FDR's Vice President. Though his falling out with Rorick had happened some years earlier, the Guru letters would surface once he decided to run for president. They had been obtained by cantankerous news columnist Westbrook Pegler through an unidentified source. Pegler, along with H.L. Mencken, questioned Wallace in a news conference about the letters, but he was, at best, evasive and refused to answer their questions in a direct manner. The letters were signed H.A.W., assumed to be Henry Asgard Wallace. In one of the letters, Wallace allegedly wrote of curing his headaches at formal dinners by rubbing his forehead with a Tibetan amulet. In another letter, he said to Roerich, "I have been thinking of you holding the casket, the sacred, most precious casket, and I have thought of the new country going forth, and I have thought of the admonition, await the stone, the sign of Shambhala."
There's these letters, and they indicate very strongly, no matter how you want to interpret them, that he was his teacher.
Wallace went on to say, "We await the stone, and we welcome you again to this glorious land of destiny." The stone he's referring to is the artifact that cipher expert Buff Perry has been following for many years now. We learned about this mysterious stone during our first interview with Perry at Manly Hall's Philosophical Research Society, where a statuette of Nicholas Roerich, holding a casket like the one described by Wallace, sits on one of the tables in the library. It was first mentioned to us by Dr. Obadiah Harris.
Now,
So-
Dr. Harris, can you tell us about this statue here?
Oh well, this would be a very favorite thing to Manly Hall. This is Nicholas Roerich, who lived in the early part of he lived even in the 20th century up until 1947. There's a Roerich Museum in New York, and this, of course, is of Mr. Roerich himself. Then there's this little casket, and in this casket symbolizes what he was given, which is the foundation stone of America. And we don't know where that stone is today. I think that Buff Perry knows a little more about where it might be now.
The devil always imitates what God has done. Jesus is called the chief cornerstone. The only foundation we can build upon is Jesus Christ. And you either fall upon that rock and be broken and contrite before God, repent and turn to Him, or that rock will fall upon you and crush you. The scriptures say. So the devil imitates that. Like, often, the scriptures have spiritual truths that the devil then imitates in physical ways. So to represent himself as an actual capstone, or like, I had no idea what's in that casket, but Luciferian occultists, when it's found, it'll probably represent the all-seeing eye of the pyramid, like the connecting stone. That's just a theory, but it makes sense to me. But the devil's an imitator, and the pyramid itself is an imitation. God dwells upon a mountain, a holy mountain, a God-created mountain. The pyramid is a man-made physical representation of a mountain, and the devil dwells upon us. The devil is just an imitator, a false God, and he imitates everything the real God does. Yeah. Well, like, for instance, scriptures talk about in Revelation how the children of God, those born again saints, were sealed with the mark of God. And that's a spiritual mark. The Holy Spirit dwells within us. The devil then counterfeits that in a physical representation, in that he's going to cause all to take a mark in their hand or in their forehead, a physical mark. So he imitates the spiritual reality with, and the Bible is all about that, spirit versus worldly, spiritual versus earthly. And so the devil is this imitator.
We then asked Buff Perry to explain the stone in relation to the statue of Nicholas Roerich.
The statue is based on a painting his wife Helena painted of him. The casket he's holding with a cloth fabric, a kind of sacred, appearing to be Tibetan cloth fabric over it, is a casket that contains a stone that variously has been called the Chintamani in Sanskrit, meaning the stone of wisdom. the Bethel stone, which was Jacob's pillow stone, that you read about in Torah in the Old Testament, which became known as a Bethel stone, because it was used at the location of what became the town of Bethel, so Bethel. So this stone has an incredible history to it that has only recently really surfaced in terms of how it ended up in the hands of Nicholas Roerich, where it came from.
There can be no question that this stone in the casket consumed Roerich through the latter part of his life. His paintings are filled with the repeated imagery of it.
And here you have a man delivering that casket up again. It appears in, it seems like almost all of Roerich's paintings. These are supposed to be his family and ascendant masters carrying the Rothenberg casket in which that stone was kept.
Roerich called the stone the treasure of the world. Even his wife, Helena, is pictured in this portrait, which hangs in the Roerich Museum, with the casket resting next to her, something she and her husband had received under mysterious circumstances in 1923.
Everything changed once they received this.
But why would this artifact be of interest to FDR's Vice President, Henry Wallace? And how could it relate to the design of the Great Seal on the dollar bill? As Buff mentioned earlier, the stone is said to be the pillow stone of Jacob, upon which he had his dream of a ladder that stretched from earth to heaven, with the angels of God ascending and descending on it. The ladder itself is a recurring symbol in secret societies, especially Freemasonry. Master Mason Albert Pike wrote extensively of Jacob's ladder in his book, Morals and Dogma, and even suggests that Jacob's ladder may in fact have been a pyramid. The book of Genesis tells us that when Jacob awoke from his dream, he took the stone and set it up for a pillar, and he said, "This stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house." As a result, some have come to believe that God, or the power of God, resides in the stone itself. From there, the legends vary, but one account says that the prophet Jeremiah took the stone and carried it into Scotland, where eventually the Scottish kings were crowned upon it.
In late March 1306, Robert the Bruce was enthroned as King of Scots at Scone in Perthshire.
An old Scottish poem says, "Except old seers do feign, and wizard wits be blind, the Scots in place must reign, where they this stone shall find." Eventually, the stone was kept at Scone Palace and was hence called the Stone of Scone. To this day, the Scots also call it the Stone of Destiny. In the year 1296, King Edward I of England captured the stone, and it was taken to Westminster Abbey for the crowning of English monarchs. In this picture, you can see the stone itself in the compartment beneath the coronation chair, a chair that was specifically built to house the Stone of Destiny. The last monarch to be crowned upon it was Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. But in 1997, the English supposedly returned the ancient stone to the Scots, with the understanding that the future monarchs of England would continue to be crowned upon it. Today, the stone is said to be housed inside Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. There is even a self-guided tour where visitors can view the Stone of Destiny, along with the Honours of Scotland, the crown jewels of Scottish royalty. According to the tour guide we spoke with while there, this is the legendary stone. But if this is true, then how could the stone have ended up inside a casket in the hands of Nicholas Roerich? The answer, given by Buff Perry and others, is that the stone currently at Edinburgh is a fake.
The stone of Scone, because the one that's actually in Edinburgh Castle is a fake, and most Scots know it. Because once the English came and stole it once, they were never going to be stolen again. So the one that's actually in the castle is not real.
Others, like Alex Salmond, the First Minister of Scotland, claimed that the stone taken by the English king in 1296 was a fake, and that the real stone was somehow hidden away secretly by the Scots. Exactly where the real Stone of Destiny is today, and how it may have changed hands over the centuries, continues to be a matter of debate. Nevertheless, its importance is recognized by nearly all occult societies in the world today.
What a bunch of nonsense.
It is the foundation stone of all history. It's also called the Philosopher's Stone. It has met the lapis exilis in the Grail literature cycles that came out of Chrétien de Troyes and Wolfram von Eschenbach. Wolfram von Eschenbach writes in Parsifal that the stone is called the Grail.
While the Holy Grail is traditionally thought of as the cup of Christ, those involved in secret societies believe that the original and oldest form of the Grail is the Stone of Destiny, written of by Wolfram von Eschenbach in his Grail legend, Parsifal.
And he calls it lapis exilis, which is a way of saying the exiled or wandering stone. He does that because of the history known in Freemasonry and in the secret societies of this stone's movement around here and there, and where it would be would indicate the importance of that place.
The stone, mentioned in Eschenbach's Grail legend, is a green stone that some believe is similar to a type of meteorite known as moldavite. This description is said to have been confirmed by Nicholas Roerich while he claimed to have the stone in his possession. The secret societies believe that this stone, that supposedly fell from heaven, empowers that person or place of its location.
And it has to do with the secret history of America and why that stone arrived here, who brought it.
As we showed earlier, Dr. Obadiah Harris referred to it as the foundation stone of America.
What is the significance of the foundation stone of America?
Well, the foundation stone is really about what America is about, and also what England seems to be about. And so it's really, it implies the great mysteries that was contained in the great mystery schools and of those who had this vision.
Was it this mystery school vision that guided FDR and his fellow Mason, Henry Wallace, as they set the all-seeing eye of the great architect on the back of the dollar bill? When one considers the repeated use of the word destiny by Manly Hall, who wrote of the secret destiny of America, along with FDR, who had knowledge of Hall's library and who said that Americans had a rendezvous with destiny. And then Henry Wallace, who referred to America itself as the land of destiny. It only makes sense that such men would have taken an interest in the Stone of Destiny. That Henry Wallace had an interest in seeking the Holy Grail is proven by the letters he wrote to Nicholas Roerich. As a Freemason, he would have seen an occult connection with America. since the stone of destiny is said to have come from heaven to earth, from the dog star Sirius. Known as the brightest star in the heavens, Sirius is an important key to understanding the stone and what the secret societies intend for the destiny of America. When the United States was founded, the architecture of Washington, D.C. was designed in alignment with the rising of Sirius in the east. July 4th, Independence Day, is the day when the sun is in conjunction with this star, said to be 23 times more powerful than the sun itself. Also consider that Sirius is the blazing star or pentagram used in Masonic lodges. But as this mystical symbol relates to the dollar bill, we read that the famous emblem of the all-seeing eye, seen hovering above the unfinished pyramid, is a depiction of the Eye of Sirius and is a common motif found throughout Masonic lore. The importance of Sirius to the secret societies cannot be overstated. Some believe that the secrets of this star are a matter of life and death. In our last documentary, Riddles in Stone, Dr. Robert Hieronymus explained the importance of the dog star Sirius. This happened during a casual discussion, and some of what he said took us by surprise. Listen now to his uncut explanation to understand how critical the secrecy of this symbol is to Freemasonry and all the secret societies. And as you listen, remember, it is...
You ever notice that the radio, what is it, the XM radio or online radio Sirius uses the dog, and I believe the dog has a star in his eye if I'm not mistaken, but the dog star, Sirius, so whoever owns that company is obviously a high-level occultist.
Sirius that rises in the east behind the sun, which stands as a picture of the twofold nature of every symbol in the occult.
Interesting thing about all Freemasonry is that symbolism is ultimately very important. They don't put a lodge in the east because it's a nice place and it looks good. They put it in the east. The masters have put it in the east, so because
the rising sun.
It's the rising sun. You're catching the energies of the light, and to them, they didn't believe that the sun was God. All right, like we're told, the ancient Egyptians, we're told all the time that they thought the sun was God. Well, to simplify it, do I have time to tell them this part?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. As with all secret societies, you have levels, and if you're on the lower levels, you don't even know they're upper levels. They don't even tell you. You bump into it by accident, or someone comes along. Now, in Scottish Rite, that's something different, because they know that there's a... But before then, and basically secret societies, such as, let's go to ancient Egypt. To the ancient Egyptians, the priest would tell the serfs, the guys that tilled the land, they would say, the sun is God. Okay? And so they accepted that very low-level interpretation, all physical. That's not what the priests believed. What the priests believed, there was a second level. The priests believed that, no, the physical sun is not the supreme being. It's the spirit which flows through the physical sun that is the supreme deity. However, there was another level. And the priests didn't even know it. It's those that were involved and elevated to if I would have told you this 15 years ago, I might have gotten shot. But this is now, I'm so glad now that this is easy to talk about. The third level, which is a higher level of understanding, said, nope, it's not, that's not the sun. The sun is not the supreme deity. Nope, yes, spiritual energies come through the sun. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the star Sirius.
The dog star.
The dog star, because the dog star was everything to the ancient Egyptians, with the rising of the Nile and the feeding of the people, and so.
Wilson says that Washington D.C. was was, you know, the Dog Star was important in the founding of Washington, D.C.
Indeed, it was, yes, and that's a reflection on America. But the point I was just trying to make was that third level is never told. And with every group, every secret society I belong to, over but 15 or 16, I don't belong to any of them now. I can't.
15 to 16
Different
societies?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, there were many different types.
While Dr. Hieronymus's claims of belonging to more than a dozen secret societies might sound incredible, it is important to remember that he is the most highly recognized authority on the history of the Great Seal.
Eye in the triangle on the pyramid.
And he is closely associated with the leading Masonic apologist in America, Dr. S. Brent Morris.
Now, you know, Bob Hieronymus, Dr. Bob, is the expert on the Great Seal.
Because of this, we believe the insights of Dr. Hieronymus not only into the Great Seal, but also on the importance of the Dog Star Sirius to secret societies becomes that much more significant. Listen again to what he says about Sirius when we make mention of the book on the secret design of Washington, D.C. by Masonic author David Oveson.
And so
Oveson says that Washington, D.C. was, you know, the Dog Star was important in the founding of Washington, D.C.
Indeed, it was, yes, and that's a reflection on America. That's a reflection on America.
How is Sirius a reflection on America, according to the secret societies? And is it just a coincidence that the Stone of Destiny, awaited by an American vice president and supposedly in the possession of his guru, is said to have come from this blazing star? In the occult, the stone is not only a type of the Holy Grail, but seems to be a symbol for the secrets of Masonry
These people, it's so ridiculous, man. They've rejected the simplicity of the scriptures, the simplicity of God, for the complexity of nonsensical, you know, esoteric, just gibberish, you know, devilish gibberish. That, yeah, there's power because the devil is given power, because the devil, again, is the god of this world currently. But it's just foolishness, you know. Christ spoke openly. He said nothing in secret. You know, he taught in the temples. His words are plain and available to all. Like, you can read the scriptures and you can get the God-given wisdom. You can get the wisdom from the Creator God. You don't need to jump through hoops and learn all these rituals and go through all these ceremonies and deal with all these symbols and numerology and artifacts and just all this nonsense. But these people have rejected the simplicity of the gospel and seek after this vanity, this nonsense. For what? So they can get positions of power for 70, 80 years? And then they die and they're judged in eternal torments. You know, it's such a foolish thing. The devil has deceived them.
understood by Henry Wallace. In his book, The Occult Conspiracy, Michael Howard says of Wallace that the Secretary of Agriculture was well versed in occult knowledge. In a letter to his Russian guru, he stated, "The search, whether it be for the lost word of Masonry, or the Holy Chalice, or the potentialities of the age to come, is the one supremely worthwhile objective. So may we strive for the chalice and the flame above it." Howard says the chalice he refers to is the Holy Grail, regarded by the Rosicrucians as a feminine symbol for perfection, and the age to come is the dawning of the Aquarian Age. The concept of the flaming chalice is another repeated theme in the paintings of Nicholas Roerich.
And you can see this entity holding the chalice, and there's a flame coming up from the middle of the cup part of the chalice. This is a painting of Prophet Muhammad, and interestingly, he's viewing a specter of a person of some sort or other who's bearing in the heart area the chalice that's burning the flame. That's consistent with Zoroastrian motifs, as well as Agni Yoga.
It's interesting that the
But
Statue
when I
of
was
Liberty holds up the chalice with the
in
flame.
Isfahan, for example, and in Tehran, I visited the Zoroastrian temples, and those chalices that bear the flames are as big as I am. And I'm sure that Nicholas Roerich had the occasion to see those chalices in the Zoroastrian temples in his journeys through the East and the Near East. But this is definitely Muhammad. He's named it Muhammad the Prophet. But for some interesting reason, Muhammad is viewing some kind of spiritual entity with that fire-bearing chalice in the heart zone.
While Roerich's paintings are today kept in a modest museum in Manhattan, they were once kept in a towering building on the Upper West Side. In the 1920s, Roerich was supported by a wealthy benefactor and Freemason named Louis Horch. Like Wallace, Horch considered Roerich to be his guru and financed the construction of a massive building to honor him. It was called the Master Building. During this era, Roerich designed what he called a piece. While Roerich's
Oops, sorry about that. I'll figure out the time on that, but I gotta stop. I'm getting pretty tired. We'll end it there and pick up next time. Alright, so that was the beginning of Eye of the Phoenix, the third part of that Chris Pinto series, America's Secret Beginnings. Real quickly, I mentioned how the Statue of Liberty holds the torch, you know, the chalice with the flame above it. And the Statue of Liberty is said to be the goddess of freedom, the Babylonian goddess, which I've heard referred to it as Liberty or as Columbia. And it's the District of Columbia is Washington, D.C., the Babylonian goddess. So just something to think about there. But anyways, very good information. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I hope some of the things we discuss and whatnot aren't too far out there for you. Like I say, we've tried to build step upon step so that you don't get these deep conspiratorial thoughts thrown on you without understanding the foundation, the biblical foundation, and why we're seeing things the way we're seeing, why this world is the way it is. So it's not dropped on you like just a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy nut. You know, it's logical, it's reasonable, it makes sense, and it's biblical. So hopefully you guys are grasping that. And as we go, we're going to get into much, much deeper things. You know, we got a long ways to go in this series. So when we're going to get into the occultism of it all and study that out as well. But anyways, I guess that's what I got for you guys tonight. As always, I appreciate you watching. I love you, and we'll talk to you next time.